It's real. It's official. America has done it again.
What?
It has found new ways to tell us how to further destroy the environment in 2023, in case we weren't already up to speed.
USA. USA.
They are the best, once they get on something. They see it through. Gotta give it to them.
Respect the stars and stripes, Adwa. Respect the stars and stripes.
Totally. Yeah. You guys do your thing. Ali, you need to participate more in this banter.
I participated. I chanted USA.
It's because she's waiting for a green card.
Oh my God. Look, USA.
Okay, yeah. And welcome to another episode of the Planet Policy Pals podcast. I'm Ajwa, and I'm joined here by...
Ala, hello. I'm the other co-host.
Hey girl, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm in a very laughy mood. I'm sleep deprived and hungry, and it's making me giggly.
Well, I feel like that's probably the best way to handle those things, to laugh it off if you can't help it.
Yeah. Okay, let's get right into it. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we discussed the auto industry and how, in some ways, they're prioritizing green technology for the sake of profit. We also discussed motivations, rollouts of new vehicles, and we looked at some of the costs behind the curtain, the costs that they're not telling you. And net improvements in the industry, of course. We did decide, well, you know what? We'll let you go listen and then you can know what our conclusion was on the whole thing. And of course, we looked at greenwashing crackdown laws and current lawsuits. Toyota. So...
Which was pretty much the brunt of our episode. So if you want some Toyota bashing, go into it.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of auto... did you hear that earlier this month there was a commercial tanker truck which was carrying a petroleum-based product and it collapsed on the Philadelphia highway?
Yeah.
It obviously caught on fire.
Oh, yeah. I mean, oil is gonna oil.
Yeah.
Crude is gonna crude.
And I mean, who's gonna worry about the physical and ecological safety of humans and this environment? The photos and videos from the scene, they actually showed really huge plumes of smoke that were coming from the interstate.
Oh my God.
And that runs from north to south from the Canadian border in Maine to Miami, Florida. So all the way through.
Oh my gosh. I realize it's horrible and that road is important, but I didn't even realize how much space it covered.
Yeah. But still, we're not hearing of any serious ecological damage, right? But do you think that's all that there is to it, or are we gonna keep hearing something soon?
So I guess when we think about it ecologically or environmentally, I guess a big thing would be delays of trash collection, right? And bus routes in the area for waste trucks. There could be a solid waste buildup issue in some areas. I mean, we are gonna have supply chain issues with food and all that stuff. More supply chain, more money. But
of course,
yeah, you have to think of trash as well. And then it is located near the Delaware River, which is upstream from a water treatment plant, which takes water from that river and provides drinking water to a good amount of the city residents. So right now, I did check on that, and the EPA and Coast Guard are watching for developments. I mean, the Coast Guard had to interrupt to go hunt down those 5 people that paid $250K to go to the depths of the ocean in a tin box. But
girl,
yeah,
I mean, they're officially a lost cause. No pun intended.
Rest in peace. But the Coast Guard response to stopping gas runoff was quick. They put one of those booms, that traps crude oil waste, things like that. Mm-hmm. So they put that on the river right away just to stop it flowing. And of course, we have to think about air quality from all that smoke, particulate matter. So we're just going to be watching to see, because if PM25, which is 25 micron sized particulate matter gets, when that's too much, that's bad for our lungs and everything. So those are possible issues, but I think right now we don't have enough data to be sure exactly what has happened.
No, of course, and these things take time, which actually brings us to our story about the very famous East Palestine, Ohio incident where the train went off the tracks and caused a fire.
I'm so excited for you to tell me things about this that I didn't even know.
Yeah, the great United States of America keeps giving us content.
You will respect the stars and stripes, I say again.
I must. So, earlier this year, unless you were living outside the US, because, the world does not revolve around them, or maybe under a rock, you probably heard about the train that was carrying these toxic chemicals and it was derailed in Ohio. And we're basically here to tell you how bad it really was and what you didn't actually hear about. So on February 3rd, a Norfolk Southern train, it was carrying toxic chemicals. It derailed in East Palestine, which caught on fire, and it set off fears of an explosion. So the train was on its way from Madison, Illinois to Conway, Pennsylvania, when around 9 p.m., 38 of its 150 cars derailed in East Palestine, which is a small village of 4,700 residents, about 50 miles northwest of Pittsburgh.
So Pittsburgh is pretty dense. Is this area also dense? There's such few people. Are they pushed together?
Okay, so yeah, that's actually not what I thought of earlier, because I thought, hey, rural America, they probably had a lot of space, but no.
Right.
These 4,700 people lived in an area of about 8.2 square kilometers.
Oh.
So yeah, that's about over 500 people per square kilometer, which is a lot, which is as dense as India.
Oh, then that's really dense.
Oh yeah. So you can imagine. So when the fire ensued right on the train, it damaged an additional 12 cars. But how did it really happen? It didn't did it just fall off? No. In its first report on the accident, the National Transportation Safety Board, which will now be referred to as NTSB, they said that the train's crew had received an alert about an overheating wheel bearing only shortly before the derailment. They also found that while the wheel bearing was heating up, the alarm did not sound to alert the crew to check that why a hot axle was heating up until the train had passed a sensor not far from where it ultimately derailed. So this was 100% preventable, according to NTSB chair.
So what do they usually do when there is overheating on a bearing? What's the usual solution?
So it really depends on what you call overheating, because I can assure you Norfolk Southern does not agree with you.
Yeah, when do they ever agree?
Yeah, of course they don't. They're a big corporation. But according to the NTSB report, the train passed 3 hot bearing detectors set at different mile points.
3?
Yeah, 3. So the first one, which was about 30 miles outside of East Palestine, the value it gave was 38 degrees above ambient temperature. The next one was 10 miles later, and that showed 103 degrees above ambient temperature. And the last one, when the alarm actually did finally sound, was 253 degrees above ambient temperature.
My goodness.
Yeah. And that's when it sent a message instructing the crew to slow and stop the train so that they could inspect the hot axle. And the reason why those first 2 hot box readings did not trigger an alert is because, according to the Norfolk Southern's policy, this is wild, okay, is that they're only going to stop and inspect a bearing after it has reached 170 degrees above ambient temperature. So to answer your question, they usually do the same thing.
What?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, that is something. That's a choice. Quite a choice.
Definitely. Yep, that's exactly pretty much the only thing you can say to describe this. But anyway, after the derailment, about 1,500 to 2,000, which is pretty much half the village, they were asked to evacuate. And 3 days later, the governor of Ohio and the governor of Pennsylvania, they expanded the evacuation zone to a 1 mile by 2 mile area around East Palestine on both sides of the line between the 2 states.
Okay.
And then they started the cleanup. So the authorities, they released toxic materials from the 5 tankers, and the contents were diverted to a trench and burned off. And the train that was carrying chemicals and combustible materials with vinyl chloride, which is actually a toxic flammable gas, it was honestly the biggest concern to investigators.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, it's true, when stuff happens like that on land, they try to, if they can't find a way to eat it up with bacteria or whatever, they just try to divert it, burn off as much as possible in a non-populated area. So that makes sense. But now I'm wondering, how bad was this environment, like wise, beyond, health implications and stuff? Was there anything with like groundwater or soil?
So the Environmental Protection Agency, they did tell Norfolk Southern in a letter that 20 rail cars had been carrying hazardous materials, and that vinyl chloride, butyl acrylate, and ethyl hexyl acrylate, and ethanol glycol monobutyl ether had been released into the air, surface soil, and surface waters. But here's the thing, right? By Feb 8, which is 5 days after, a Republican told that residents could return because air quality samples, their measured contaminants were below levels of concern. However, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources said that the chemical spill had affected about 7.5 miles of stream and had killed an estimated 3,500 fish. So honestly, I would have taken that with a grain of salt. And I think actually a lot of people did. Soon after, even the EPA said that it had not detected contaminants at levels of concern in and around East Palestine, and that it had found no breaches of quality standards after testing hundreds of homes. However, during a meeting in East Palestine, frustrated residents, they described their lack of trust in public officials, and in Norfolk Southern, honestly, rightfully so, because a lot of them are usually in their pockets. Not accusing anyone, but that's just how the system usually seems to be. And the residents also said that no one had clearly communicated the scale of the disaster and the public health threat. And of course, the representatives from Norfolk Southern did not attend. Surprise. The EPA administrator, Michael S. Regan, who had visited East Palestine for the first time since the derailment, said that residents who had private wells should use bottled water until tests showed that the water was safe to drink. Mr. Shapiro, he said that the independent testing had not detected concerning air or water quality readings as a result of the derailment in Pennsylvania. Now, where's Norfolk Southern, you ask? Well, Alan H. Shaw, who is the Norfolk Southern's chief executive, said that the one time that he did visit East Palestine, that hazardous material was being cleaned, and the EPA said that the liquid waste was being disposed of at a facility in Vickery, and solid waste was being shipped to an incinerator in East Liverpool. EPA also ordered Norfolk Southern to identify and clean up any contaminated soil and water, reimburse it for cleaning homes and businesses, and attend public meetings, which, mind you, they weren't doing, and take other measures. And they said that if the company failed to complete those actions, it would seek to compel Norfolk Southern to pay triple the cost of the work.
I heard they did soil testing in the area because, it's pretty rural, right? So I know the officials in Ohio, like you just said, they're good to go. And then EPA said use bottled water. So, are they fully good to go right now?
So, they are constantly monitoring. They continue to review preliminary and final air sampling data, which supports air monitoring trends that air quality has remained below screening levels. Also, they're doing excavation of contaminated soil around the northern track, which started in late April, and hopefully it will be completed this week. Excavated soils are shipped off-site for proper disposal, and clean dirt is brought in to fill the excavated areas. And when soil waste is loaded or staged, there may be increased vapors. Still, continuous air monitoring is done so that, the air remains safe. Vapor suppressant foam is used on active piles to reduce odors. There are some chemicals of concern, such as butyl acrylate, which have a low odor threshold and can be smelled below levels of concern. but they are monitoring everything. And as for soil testing, EPA's review of non-validated results, kind of like the preliminary results, they indicate that the vast majority of reportable concentrations of these semi-volatile organic compounds and dioxins or furans are consistent with known concentrations for soil in urban and rural areas. So there are a few properties with elevated levels of compound that will be evaluated for further assessment, but they are apparently keeping a really good watch over it. And so far, they're keeping the residents safe.
I mean, that's good. That sounds like they have a good plan going there. So yay for that.
So, of course, keeping up with the EPA orders, a month later, Daryl Wilson, who's a senior Norfolk Southern official, finally attended a town meeting in East Palestine where residents shared their frustrations, and some said that they were still living in hotels or experiencing health problems. The EPA then instructed Norfolk Southern to test for dioxins, toxic pollutants that could have formed after the chemical burn-off.
Wow. So obviously a lot went down. How did this impact people, humanity, our community?
Well, I mean, obviously, because the disaster is so shocking in its scale and potential effects. Unfortunately, we may not fully know the disaster's long-term health and environmental impacts for months or even years because these things take time to play out.
Why is that?
Well, like the Bhopal incident or like any other chemical or like nuclear spill, it takes years for authorities to realize how it's actually showing up or reflecting in people or reflecting in other species with plants and all of that stuff. So they won't know unless a few people die of cancer. And cancer takes a while to develop. Not saying that they will, but, these kind of things do usually tend to lead to that. And that's a long-term process to find out.
That's true.
So 2 weeks after the derailment, Norfolk Southern reported the chemical spill contaminated at least 15,000 pounds of soil and 1.1 million gallons of water.
That's a lot of water.
Mm-hmm. And this is really significant because Ohio officials, they use fish as an indicator of water quality because they live in it. So they are exposed to any contaminants at a much higher rate, according to a professor at University of Cincinnati. Locals documented images of like dead fish and like an oily sheen that they saw along Ohio River tributaries days after the spill. And those streams are reintroduction sites for the hellbender salamander. I would not want to be that salamander right now.
It's always so cool when I see like us using species as indicators for other things. It's so crazy. Like ecosystems are so delicate and we're constantly messing with them.
I mean, of course, because we think we are the only inhabitants of this God's green planet.
We're the blueprint.
So I know we don't know much about the impacts, but we do know the chemicals that were found. So apart from vinyl chloride, the chemical that was released in really large quantities and was burned off and has been extensively covered by news reports, there are actually 4 additional hazardous chemicals that are either known to have been and continue to be released in the air, surface soils, and surface waters. And those are ethyl hexyl acrylate, which is a carcinogen that's harmful if swallowed and is toxic to aquatic life with long-lasting effects. Then there was ethylene glycol monobutyl, which is also a carcinogen that can be absorbed through the skin and cause liver and kidney damage. Butyl acrylate, which is extremely flammable chemical that can burn skin and eyes, and it can cause permanent lung damage. There was also isobutylene, also a very highly flammable compound that can irritate eyes, nose, and throat, and it can cause coma or even death at really high levels of exposure. And these findings were actually by the EPA after they did water sampling, and they showed these in the Ohio River, which actually provides drinking water for more than 5 million people in the great United States of America.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And these chemicals have actually been observed running into storm drains, and they cite potential for soil contamination, of course. And even though the residents of East Palestine were initially evacuated, but they have been permitted to return to their homes. And even though officials may not be taking them seriously, But some have complained of headaches, rashes, and other health problems since returning, and they've even observed sickness and death among pets and other animals.
You know what? This is so interesting, to be honest with you, because when you think about it, right, like you just said that most of their drinking water comes from the river. So their drinking water source is surface water. Because I was going to ask, like, where do they get their drinking water? But if it's surface water, they don't even have to wait long for themselves to get screwed. That's interesting.
Yeah, the way that East Palestine is, it is actually served by a public water system that sources its water from 5 wells. And these wells pump water from 52 to about 98 feet below ground. But the good thing is that none of the wells are within 1.5 miles of the train derailment site. And groundwater to the source wells is fed primarily from the northwest and flows to the east, meaning any groundwater at the derailment site is not expected to reach the source area for the municipal water system.
That's cool then. I was thinking maybe they were getting their water from this river, surface water, but they're getting it from groundwater, so fingers crossed there's not as much contamination.
Yeah, let's hope. They did set up like 4 monitoring wells that were installed between the 2 impacted waterways, which was Sulphur Run and Leslie Run, and the village's well field to ensure that there's, like, of course, safety of the water supply. By testing the waters in these wells, they could just weigh out any potential contaminants that will be discovered before they actually reach the village's wells.
Okay.
Yeah, but of course, the danger is still there. They're still concerned that harmful compounds could remain in the environment for really long periods of time. The photos and videos that were collected by community members, they appear to show really brightly colored chemicals that are being released into the water when the stream bed is disturbed, which indicates that some of the spilled material has actually settled into the sediment. And this, of course, poses a huge risk to benthic organisms, and it may predict the accumulation of toxic compounds in the food web.
The food web is what I'm really interested in too, right? Like with the soil and stuff and water, it's going to be... I'm just hoping for the best for these people. They don't deserve this.
Yeah.
So let's get into who got punished.
Well, yeah, of course, we love that. But so the Pennsylvania governor, Mr. Shapiro, he said that he had secured an initial commitment from Norfolk Southern to pay more than $7 million in damages to Pennsylvania, and including a $1 million community relief fund. Honestly, it does not seem like a lot given what they did, but the NTSB said it had opened a special investigation into the safety practices at Norfolk Southern because of 5 significant accidents that have happened since December 2021, including the East Palestine derailment. So the Federal Railroad Administration, which is basically the primary rail safety regulator, they announced that it would conduct a 60-day safety assessment of Norfolk Southern.
Oh, well, that's good. Wow. It really seems like Norfolk is just kind of doing what they want, although I do love a good fine and I love an investigation. But I heard that their accident rates have been going up recently, but so has their profits. I feel like they're cutting corners somewhere. So are there any lawsuits outside these fines, or, is it like big corporations doing what they do?
Yeah, they're actually, capitalism did kind of win again.
Capitalism is going to capitalism.
It is going to do what it does best. But they did, on a national level, did take it seriously. Ohio's Attorney General, they filed a 58-count federal lawsuit against Norfolk Southern, and it accused it of numerous violations of state and federal environmental laws, as it should. The lawsuit also raises claims of public nuisance and trespass. It's seeking to force the company to pay civil penalties, costs, and damages to reimburse the state of economic losses and harm to natural resources, which I still think is something. The Justice Department, which is acting on behalf of the EPA, they also filed a lawsuit against Norfolk Southern, and they demanded that the company pay cleanup costs and penalties under the Clean Water Act, even though things are changing with that in itself. The suit does allege that Norfolk Southern prioritized profits over safety because capitalism gonna capitalism.
Right.
With annual reports over the past 4 years that it showed that its income has increased and the company has actually reduced spending on the repair, servicing, and inspection of freight cars and on payments to engine and train crews. And all of that money for themselves.
Sensational.
Yeah, but like I said, governments are taking action. The government is taking action. Like in the first proposal that was emerged in the Congress since the derailment, it was by the two Democrats, of course.
Yes.
They introduced a bill to broaden the definition of what is considered a high hazard flammable train, which was also very much needing to be addressed. And also, very interestingly, there was a group of Republicans and Democrats in the Senate. They proposed a legislation to mandate that the Transportation Department tighten their safety rules for freight rails. So honestly, bipartisan activity is what you really need to get this mess sorted.
I know. I love to see bipartisan activity. And I heard a little bit about this. I thought it was a big deal, but I don't know as much. So what are they actually going to implement in terms of like maybe inspections, audits? I don't know.
Yeah, so like it is actually implemented as of May 2023, the Railway Safety Act of 2023. It expands the types of chemicals that trigger these specific safety requirements, so that trains that are carrying vinyl chloride and other explosive and toxic materials, including all these flammable gas or poisonous gas and nuclear material, are actually subjected to the same safety requirements as flammable liquid trains. And it also requires Department of Transportation to update railcar inspection regulations and audit the federal inspection program. And they also introduced some increases to the maximum fines that the Department of Transportation can impose on rail carriers for violating safety regulations.
Okay, this seems like actual things.
Yeah, but interestingly, actually, like Norfolk Southern chief executive, he told the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee that he was deeply sorry for the effects of the derailment.
Oh my God.
But he stopped short of promising to pay for long-term medical costs, healthcare, and economic damages from the accident because, they're going to show up later. And he's like, you know what? Not going to go that far. I am sorry, but, not that sorry.
He's like, I'm maybe 65% sorry. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that not good enough? Is sorry not working for you?
Yeah, he's like, I'm sorry it happened, but, it's done. I'm not going to keep paying for it.
Yeah, like, be for real. Anyway, this was a very interesting story. Thank you, Ajwa. I learned a lot more about this than I had known initially. So question for you, because the US has been averaging like an accident, what was it, every 2 days, every 2 weeks, whatever we read. Mm-hmm. This year alone, it's been crazy. Do you think this is the wake-up call that we needed, or is this something we're going to keep seeing?
I think given the impact that this train derailment did have, also following the Inflation Reduction Act and the U.S., in terms of its policies, barred the Clean Water Act, as long as we will have the Supreme Court judges, I don't think we're going to move in the right direction for a while. But let's hope they retire soon. But I do think that there are some legislations and people are talking about it a lot more. How quickly this train incident caused an actual railway act to come out within months of the accident is actually I think it's a really big moment. And so as long as we see this being implemented and we see regulations coming out like this, we may not keep seeing this. But that's why we keep saying that action is important and we need to take it as soon as it happens so that we can stop it. And let's stop siding with corporations, please.
10 out of 10, I agree. And to be honest with you, I do feel like you're right. This has to be a really bipartisan thing. This can't be one thing where this administration says, let's do this. And then the next administration is like, no, I'm going to go with corporations. It really can't be like that, or else it's never going to change. But what do you guys think of these accidents? Do you guys think, first of all, is it going to change, right? What we just discussed. But also, do you guys think a lot of these accidents that have been happening recently are avoidable? What are your thoughts? Tell us. And of course, as we always do, let's highlight an organization. Today, I wanted to talk about the Indigenous Climate Action Group, which is an indigenous-led organization, duh, from the name. And it's a diverse group of people. They're knowledge keepers, water protectors, land defenders, and they're just trying to support indigenous people's rights to the resources that literally belong to them before people try to take them away, or actually did kind of take them away. So it's a climate justice thing, which we love on this show. And it's important because indigenous people tend to be on the short end of the stick. Even when spills or accidents happen, indigenous lands don't see as much response or quick response. And it's a bureaucratic thing partially, but I also think it's a little discriminatory.
Actually, there is an ongoing debate in the Supreme Court regarding access for Navajo tribes to water from the Colorado River, which is insane to me. Because
it's crazy.
If they really want to talk about go back to your country, guys, it's theirs.
Yeah, wild. Anyway, you guys, that is our show. Please check out our website, planetpolicy.com, for updates. Email us, leave a voicemail, rate, and review us. You guys review us, okay? We have now put out 2 episodes. It is time for you guys to go back to rating us. Follow us on Twitter at Planet Policy Pal, Instagram at Planet Policy Pals, and like our Facebook page. This show is created, written, and edited by us. The main writer for this episode was Adwa Zahid, with very little additional writing by me, Alaiba Sabanitari.
That's not true. You added a lot of questions for me to answer.
I did have a lot of questions. In addition, we utilize multiple resources from researchers, science journalists, government agencies. For this show, we're not thieves. You can find these sources in our show notes or on our website. This episode, we use sources from the New York Times, University of Cincinnati News, Earth.org, the US NTSB, Penn Future, Al Jazeera News, The Guardian News, the AP News, and US EPA. So we know what we're talking about. Thank you for always supporting us. We hope you guys learned something new. And until next time, keep learning, pals.